A lonely widowed craftsman thought his life would never change again until a mysterious woman in a red dress walked into his small town. Months later, he discovers she isn't who she claimed to be. She's one of the most powerful CEOs in America. Hurt by her secret, he walks away. But as both are forced to confront the fears they've spent years hiding, one question remains. Can two broken hearts find their way back before it's too late? Stay until the end, because this story may remind you that God's greatest miracles often arrive when we least expect them. Before we begin, share where you're watching from. And if this story stirs something in you, subscribe for more stories of honor, sacrifice. Your support truly means the world. Late August sunlight spilled across the rolling hills of Napa Valley, turning the vineyards gold as a warm breeze carried the scent of grapes and dry earth through the valley. Ryan Carter barely noticed any of it. At 39, Ryan had developed the habit of looking at things without really seeing them. Life had become something he moved through, rather than something he experienced. He stood inside his workshop on the edge of town, sanding the armrest of a century-old oak chair while sunlight streamed through the open garage doors. The building smelled of cedar dust, varnish, and old wood. It wasn't much to look at from the outside, but inside, every piece carried a story waiting to be restored. Ryan preferred old furniture to people. Furniture was honest. People rarely were. Tall and broad-shouldered, Ryan looked more like a rancher than an artisan. Years of physical labor had thickened his frame without making him heavy. His dark brown hair was beginning to show strands of gray near his temples, and a short, neatly kept beard framed a face marked by long hours, responsibility, and loss. His features were sharp and masculine, but there was a quiet weariness behind his blue eyes that hadn't been there 10 years earlier. 5 years ago, his wife Sarah had died from a sudden heart condition. One ordinary Tuesday morning, she had kissed him goodbye. By sunset, she was gone. Nothing in Ryan's life had felt ordinary since. The loss hadn't made him bitter. It had made him careful. Careful with hope, careful with happiness, careful with anyone who might matter. A golden retriever named Duke lay asleep near the workshop entrance. At 11 years old, the dog moved slower than he used to. His golden fur faded almost white around the muzzle. Sarah had adopted Duke when he was a puppy, insisting every family needed a dog. Ryan often joked that Duke had inherited Sarah's friendliness because he never met a stranger he didn't immediately trust. The bell above the workshop door jingled. Ryan looked up. His daughter Emma walked inside carrying 2 iced coffees. Emma Carter was 18 and preparing to leave for college in a few months. She had inherited her mother's dark hair and warm smile, though her sharp intelligence clearly came from somewhere else. Unlike Ryan, Emma moved through the world with curiosity instead of caution. She placed one coffee beside him. "You've been working on that chair for 3 days." Ryan glanced at her. "It's 100 years old." "So are you." He snorted. "I'm 39. Emotionally, you're at least 80. Ryan shook his head. "You practicing your comedy routine again?" "No, just observing." Emma leaned against a workbench. "You know normal people take weekends off. Normal people don't have customers waiting. You know what else normal people do?" Ryan pointed the sanding block at her. "Careful. They leave the workshop occasionally." He laughed despite himself. Emma smiled. Small victories. She had spent years trying to pull her father back into the world. Sometimes she succeeded. Most days, she didn't. As they talked, a black SUV rolled slowly down the road outside. Emma noticed it first. "That's new." Ryan glanced through the open doors. Most vehicles in Napa were pickup trucks, farm equipment, or tourist rentals. This wasn't any of those. The SUV continued toward the vineyard properties beyond town. Ryan returned to work. Probably another wine investor. Emma rolled her eyes. You find every possible topic boring. It's a gift. It's a problem. A few hours later, after closing the workshop, Ryan drove toward home. The road wound through vineyards, stretching endlessly across the hills. Near the far edge of the valley sat a small guest house that had been empty for nearly a year. Tonight, lights glowed behind its windows. Someone had moved in. Ryan noticed a woman sitting alone on the front porch. She wore a red dress, not bright red, not flashy, a deep wine red that somehow matched the valley around her. For a moment, she seemed completely still, not reading, not looking at her phone, just sitting, watching the sunset. Ryan drove past, but something about her stayed in his mind. The next morning, he saw her again. The town's weekly farmers market was crowded with locals and tourists. Ryan was loading vegetables into a paper bag when he spotted the same woman near a flower stand. She stood out immediately. Not because she was beautiful, though she was. It was the way she carried herself. Confident without trying to be noticed. Elegant without appearing vain. She looked to be in her early 30s, with long, chestnut-brown hair that fell softly over her shoulders. Her features were refined but not delicate. There was strength in her posture, intelligence in her eyes, and an unusual composure that made people instinctively move around her without realizing why. Yet despite all that confidence, she seemed disconnected from everything around her, like someone attending a party after deciding to leave. The florist handed her a bouquet. She thanked him politely. Then she walked away alone. No friends, no family, no conversation. Just silence. Ryan watched for a second longer than necessary. Then he looked away. None of his business. That evening he saw her again. Same porch, same red dress, same stillness. As if she had nowhere she needed to be. Over the following week, the pattern repeated. Every morning she appeared somewhere in town. Every evening she sat alone overlooking the vineyards. Always alone, always watching. Ryan found himself noticing, not because he was interested, at least that's what he told himself. The truth was harder to admit. She looked familiar, not physically, emotionally. She carried the same expression he sometimes saw in the mirror late at night. The expression of someone who had built an entire life around moving forward, and suddenly didn't know where to go next. One evening, as Ryan locked the workshop doors, Duke lifted his head. The dog stared across the road. The woman in the red dress was standing there. For a moment, their eyes met. She offered a small, polite smile. Not flirtatious, not inviting, just human. Ryan nodded once. She nodded back, then continued walking. The interaction lasted maybe 3 seconds, yet as Ryan watched her disappear into the fading sunlight, he felt something unfamiliar. Not excitement, not attraction. Curiosity. And curiosity was dangerous, because curiosity was how stories began. And Ryan Carter had spent 5 years making sure his own story never changed. The following Saturday arrived with the kind of clear California morning that made Napa Valley look almost unreal. Rows of vineyards stretched beneath a pale blue sky, while sunlight reflected off distant hills. Ryan had been working since sunrise, trying to finish a walnut dining table commission before the end of the month. The rhythmic scrape of sandpaper filled the workshop. Duke was asleep in his usual spot near the entrance. For nearly 3 hours, Nothing interrupted the routine Ryan knew so well. Then, the bell above the workshop door rang. He looked up. The woman in the red dress stood just inside the doorway. Today she wore jeans, a cream-colored sweater, and sunglasses pushed into her hair. Without the red dress, she looked less mysterious and more human. Younger somehow. Still beautiful. Still composed. Still carrying that strange sadness behind her eyes. Ryan immediately felt annoyed that he noticed. "Morning," she said. Her voice was lower than he expected, calm and competent. "Morning." For a second, neither moved. Then Duke stood up. The old dog walked directly toward her. Ryan blinked. Duke rarely approached strangers first anymore. The retriever stopped in front of her and sat. The woman smiled. "Well, hello there." She knelt and gently scratched behind Duke's ears. The old dog immediately leaned into her hand. "Traitor." Ryan shook his head. "Looks like you've been approved." She laughed softly. "I'll consider it an honor." For the first time, Ryan noticed how natural her smile looked when it appeared. It transformed her face completely. "I'm Charlotte," she said. "Ryan." "I know." He raised an eyebrow. "Small town." "Fair enough." Her gaze moved around the workshop. The old furniture, the unfinished table, the shelves lined with antique tools, the framed photographs on the wall. One picture briefly caught her attention. A younger Ryan standing beside a smiling woman with dark hair. Sarah. Charlotte immediately looked away. She understood enough not to ask. "What brings you here?" Ryan asked. Charlotte hesitated. "I saw your sign." Ryan waited. She smiled slightly. "That's not entirely true." "What is true?" "I've been walking past this place for 2 weeks." And I got curious." Ryan almost laughed. Curiosity. That made 2 of them. Charlotte spent nearly an hour inside the workshop, not talking much, just watching. Most people filled silence because they feared it. Charlotte seemed comfortable inside it. That alone made her different. When she finally left, Ryan expected that would be the end of it. It wasn't. 3 days later, she returned. Then again the following week. Eventually, her visits became routine. Sometimes she brought coffee. Sometimes she sat in a chair near the workbench reading a book while Ryan worked. Sometimes neither spoke for an hour. Surprisingly, neither seemed bothered by it. One evening, Emma arrived at the workshop carrying a cardboard tube full of architectural drawings. She stopped when she saw Charlotte, then immediately smiled. Emma had inherited her mother's ability to adopt people without warning. "You must be Charlotte." Charlotte looked up from her book. "And you must be Emma." Emma set the drawings down. "Dad talks about you." Ryan nearly dropped a hammer. "No, I don't." "You absolutely do." Charlotte bit back a smile. Ryan pointed at his daughter. "You enjoy creating problems." "It's one of my best qualities." Emma spread several drawings across a work table. She was designing a small, eco-friendly guest house as part of her final architecture portfolio before college. Charlotte studied the sketches. "What software did you use for the renderings?" Emma blinked. "You know architecture software?" "A little." The answer sounded suspiciously modest. Within 10 minutes, Charlotte was pointing out structural issues that Ryan didn't even understand. Within 20 minutes, she had identified 3 design flaws and 2 cost overruns. Emma stared. "Dad?" "What?" "I think she's smarter than both of us." Charlotte laughed. Ryan found himself watching her again. The laugh disappeared quickly, almost as if she wasn't used to it. As the weeks passed, Charlotte gradually became part of their lives. Not officially, not intentionally. It simply happened. She joined them for dinner one evening, then another. Soon, Emma was texting her project updates. Duke followed her around whenever she visited. Ryan noticed things, small things. The way Charlotte always answered phone calls outside. The way her expression hardened whenever business was mentioned. The way she occasionally stared into space for long periods, as if replaying old mistakes. One night after dinner, Emma left to meet friends. Charlotte helped clear dishes. The kitchen was quiet, the comfortable kind of quiet. Ryan washed plates while Charlotte dried them. An ordinary moment, yet it felt strangely significant. "You ever miss it?" Charlotte asked suddenly. Ryan didn't need clarification. "Sarah. Every day." Charlotte nodded, not offering sympathy, not offering cliches, just understanding. That felt rarer. "Does it get easier?" she asked. Ryan considered the question. "No." She looked at him. "No?" "It gets different." Charlotte absorbed that, like someone filing away important information. A few minutes later, she spoke again. "What if you stop moving forward?" Ryan glanced at her. "What do you mean?" "What if one day you realize you've spent years surviving instead of living?" The question landed harder than she probably intended. Ryan dried his hands. For a moment he couldn't answer, because the truth was uncomfortable. He knew exactly what she meant. The workshop, the routines, the carefully controlled life. Safe, predictable, unchanging. Sarah's death had shattered him once, so he'd built a life where nothing could break him again. The problem was that nothing could truly reach him either. Finally, he looked at Charlotte. "Sounds like you're asking for yourself." For the first time since he'd met her, genuine vulnerability crossed her face. Only for a second, then it vanished. Maybe she was, maybe she wasn't. Neither of them pushed further, but later, after Charlotte left, Ryan remained sitting alone in the workshop, Duke asleep beside him, the lights dim, the silence heavy. For years he had convinced himself he was healing. Tonight, for the first time, he wondered whether he had simply become very good at standing still. And somewhere across the valley, in the small house overlooking the vineyards, Charlotte Bennett sat alone on her porch again, holding a phone that wouldn't stop vibrating, watching the screen light up with messages she refused to answer. Messages from a life she clearly wasn't ready to return to. October arrived quietly in Napa Valley. The summer tourists had mostly disappeared, leaving behind empty tasting rooms, quieter roads, and vineyards slowly turning shades of gold and rust beneath the cooling California sky. Ryan noticed Charlotte was spending more time at the workshop, not talking, just being there. Sometimes she sat near the large front window, reading reports on a tablet she always locked the moment someone walked by. Sometimes she watched him work. Sometimes she stared out at the vineyards for so long that Ryan suspected she wasn't seeing them at all. Whatever she was looking at existed somewhere far beyond Napa. One Tuesday afternoon, Emma burst into the workshop carrying her laptop. "Dad!" Ryan didn't look up. "Dad!" Something in her voice made him stop sanding. Emma stood frozen beside the workbench. Her expression had completely changed. "What happened?" She turned the laptop toward him. "Tell me that's not Charlotte." Ryan frowned. The screen displayed a business magazine article. The photograph took up nearly half the page. A woman stood on stage in a fitted crimson dress before a massive audience, confident, powerful, controlled. Her name appeared beneath the headline, Charlotte Bennett, CEO of Bennett Hospitality Group. Ryan stared. For several seconds, his brain refused to connect the image to the woman who spent afternoons drinking coffee in his workshop. Then it did. The same eyes, the same smile, the same woman. The article continued below. The youngest CEO in the company's history. Hotels across 3 continents. Billions in annual revenue. Named one of the most influential executives in America. Ryan slowly sat down. Emma spoke first. Please tell me you knew. He didn't answer. Emma sighed. Oh no. The silence told her everything. For the first time since meeting Charlotte, Ryan felt something unpleasant settle in his chest. Not jealousy, not intimidation, something closer to disappointment. The article itself didn't bother him. The money didn't bother him. The success didn't bother him. The lie bothered him. Or maybe not even the lie, the choice behind it, the decision she had made every single day not to tell him. 3 days later, Charlotte arrived at the workshop as usual. She carried 2 coffees. Ryan immediately knew she didn't know. She smiled when she entered. That smile disappeared the moment she saw his face. Something happened. It wasn't a question. Ryan set down a chisel. When were you planning to tell me? Charlotte became perfectly still. The reaction confirmed everything. A long silence followed. Finally, she placed the coffees on a nearby table. You found out. Ryan laughed once, no humor in it. Found out what exactly? Charlotte looked away. For the first time since he'd met her, she seemed unsure of herself. I was going to tell you. When? I don't know. Ryan nodded slowly. At least that's honest. The words landed harder than he intended. Charlotte crossed her arms, a defensive gesture. You're angry. I'm trying to decide if I should be. She looked hurt, genuinely hurt, which somehow made things worse. Ryan, no. His voice remained calm, too calm. I've spent months sitting across from you at dinner. You've spent time with my daughter. You've been inside my home. Charlotte's expression tightened. I know. You know what bothers me? The money. Ryan laughed again, this time louder. See? That's exactly the problem. Charlotte blinked. The money is the least interesting thing about this. For the first time, uncertainty appeared in her eyes. Ryan stood. You decided who I was before I ever had a chance to decide who you were. That's not fair, isn't it? Charlotte took a step closer. No, it isn't. The controlled executive began to disappear. The woman underneath emerged. I didn't tell you because every time people find out who I am, everything changes. Ryan said nothing. She continued. They stop talking to me normally. Her voice grew sharper. They either want something, or they're intimidated, or they suddenly start treating me like I'm not a person anymore. So you lied. I protected myself. Ryan shook his head. You didn't protect yourself. Charlotte's jaw tightened. What does that mean? It means you never trusted us enough to give us the choice. The words hit hard. For several seconds, neither moved. Outside, a truck passes on the road. Inside, the workshop felt impossibly quiet. Charlotte looked away first. The vulnerability vanished. The walls returned. You don't understand. Ryan felt frustration rise. Then explain it. Her eyes met his. For a moment, he thought she might. might finally tell him everything. Instead, she shook her head. I can't. Ryan stared at her. There it was, the real problem. Not the CEO title, not the company, not the wealth, the secrets. Always the secrets. You know, he said quietly, for months I thought maybe you were running from something. Charlotte's face changed, only slightly, but enough, Ryan noticed. And now? Now he wasn't sure. Maybe she wasn't running from something. Maybe she was running from herself. Emma entered at exactly the wrong moment. She stopped near the doorway, immediately sensing the tension. Charlotte looked at her. Emma looked back. Neither spoke. The silence stretched. Finally, Charlotte forced a smile. Hi, Emma. Emma tried to smile back. It didn't quite work. Hi. Nobody moved. Nobody knew what to say. The article had changed everything. Charlotte looked suddenly exhausted, not physically, emotionally, like someone who had spent years carrying a weight she couldn't put down. Finally, she picked up her purse. I should go. Ryan didn't stop her. That hurt more than he expected. Charlotte looked at him one final time, waiting. For what, he wasn't sure. An apology, an argument, an invitation to stay. Instead, he said nothing. The silence became the answer. A few seconds later, she walked out. The bell above the workshop door rang softly, then she was gone. For the first time in months, the workshop felt empty again. Emma waited until Charlotte's car disappeared down the road, then she quietly sat beside her father. Are you okay? Ryan stared at the doorway. No. Emma nodded. Yeah. Neither spoke for a while. Outside, evening shadows stretched across the vineyards. Inside, Duke lifted his head and looked toward the empty parking lot, as if waiting for someone to return. But Charlotte Bennett did not come back the next day, or the day after that. And as the silence between them grew longer, Ryan began to wonder whether the problem had ever been who Charlotte was, or whether it was the fact that he suddenly realized he cared enough to be hurt. The first week without Charlotte felt strange. The second week felt worse. By the third, Ryan stopped pretending he hadn't noticed her absence. Autumn settled deeper across Napa Valley. The vineyards that had glowed gold a month earlier were now stripped nearly bare, their twisted vines exposed against gray skies. Rain arrived more frequently, tapping against workshop windows and turning the dirt roads outside town into mud. Inside the workshop, everything continued exactly as before. That was the problem. Ryan arrived at 7, worked until 6, ate dinner, watched television he never paid attention to, slept, repeated. The routine that had once felt safe now felt suffocating. One afternoon, Emma found him staring at the same unfinished cabinet for nearly 10 minutes. You haven't touched that piece. Ryan glanced up. What? You've been holding the same screwdriver since I got here. Ryan looked down. She was right. Emma sat on a workbench. At 19, she had inherited Sarah's ability to read people with uncomfortable accuracy. Her dark hair was tied into a loose ponytail, and she wore paint stains on her jeans from an architecture model she had been building all week. You miss her. Ryan immediately returned to work. No, Emma laughed. You're terrible at lying. I'm not lying. You absolutely are. The screwdriver hit the table harder than intended. Emma's expression softened. Dad. Ryan exhaled heavily. What? You know this isn't about her being rich. The words landed directly on the target, because that truth had become impossible to avoid. At first, Ryan had told himself the problem was the secrecy. Then he told himself the problem was trust. But alone at night, he had begun admitting something else, something far more uncomfortable. Charlotte mattered. That was the real problem. 5 years ago, Sarah had died. The grief had nearly destroyed him. Not dramatically, not all at once. Slowly, day after day, piece by piece. The pain had taught him a lesson. Loving someone gave life meaning. It also gave life the power to break you. For years, Ryan had carefully avoided that risk. Then Charlotte arrived. And somehow she had slipped past every defense he built. Emma watched him quietly. Finally, she said, "You're scared." Ryan laughed bitterly. Of what? Of caring. For once, he didn't argue, because she was right. Across the country, nearly 3,000 miles away, Charlotte Bennett sat alone in a Manhattan boardroom. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked New York City. The skyline stretched endlessly beneath a cold November sky. Normally, Charlotte loved this view. Today, she hated it. The boardroom table was surrounded by executives discussing quarterly projections, revenue, expansion plans, acquisitions, numbers. Always numbers. Charlotte had spent 12 years climbing toward this position. At 34, she controlled one of the largest hospitality companies in America. Everything she once believed she wanted sat directly in front of her. Yet she had never felt further from herself. "Charlotte?" The voice interrupted her thoughts. David Mercer sat across the table. David was 58, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, and one of the oldest members of the board. Years in corporate leadership had sharpened him into someone who rarely wasted words. He wasn't cruel, just practical. The kind of man who viewed emotions as inefficiencies. "You seem distracted." Charlotte straightened. "I'm listening." "No." David folded his hands. "You're physically present." Several executives avoided eye contact. They knew he was right. Charlotte hadn't truly been present since returning from Napa. The meeting ended 40 minutes later. As executives filtered out, David remained behind. "So," Charlotte gathered her papers. "So what?" "Who is he?" She froze. Only briefly, but David noticed. Experienced people always did. "I don't know what you're talking about." David smiled slightly. "Of course you do." Charlotte looked away. The city lights reflected against the glass. "You're considering walking away from expansion plans you've spent 3 years building." David stood. "You're rejecting opportunities you would have fought for 6 months ago." He paused. "That's never about business." Charlotte remained silent. After a moment, David spoke again. "Whatever it is, make a decision." She frowned. "Excuse me?" "People become miserable when they try to live 2 different lives." Then he left. The words stayed. That night, Charlotte sat alone in her penthouse apartment. The space was beautiful. Huge windows, designer furniture, modern artwork, everything carefully selected, everything expensive, everything empty. She poured a glass of wine and walked onto the balcony. Below her, Manhattan buzzed with life. Thousands of people, millions of lights, yet she had never felt more alone. Her phone buzzed. Ryan's contact remained exactly where she had left it. She stared at the screen, then locked the phone again. Too proud to call, too hurt to forget. The following week, the board officially requested a private meeting. Charlotte already knew why. There had been rumors for months. Now they finally arrived. 12 board members sat around the conference table, David included. The atmosphere felt different immediately, more serious, more deliberate. The chairman spoke first. "We need you back in New York, full-time." Charlotte remained expressionless. The chairman continued. "The company requires stronger leadership visibility." Translation: they didn't trust her divided attention. Another board member leaned forward. "We understand Napa Valley was helpful after the stress of the last few years." Helpful, as if the entire experience could be summarized in a single word. "But it's time to move forward." Charlotte looked around the room, around the polished table, around the people who measured value through growth charts and shareholder reports. For years, she had spoken their language. Today, it felt foreign. The chairman continued. "We need an answer." Charlotte should have responded immediately. The old Charlotte would have. Confident, decisive, certain. Instead, she found herself thinking about a woodworking shop, a golden retriever sleeping by the door, a stubborn man who looked at her like a person instead of a CEO. And for the first time in more than a decade, a question appeared. Not about business, not about profit, about life. What if she didn't want this anymore? The thought terrified her, because it wasn't supposed to exist. Charlotte Bennett had always known exactly where she was going. Now, she wasn't sure. And that uncertainty frightened her far more than losing any company ever could. The vineyards stood bare beneath pale skies, their harvest long finished. Rain came and went without urgency. The valley seemed quieter than usual, as if the entire landscape had settled into a season of patience. Ryan Carter was learning patience too. Not because life had suddenly become easier, because life had finally become uncertain again. And strangely, that no longer frightened him. Nearly 4 months had passed since Charlotte left Napa. At first, he measured time by her absence. Then he stopped. Work continued, customers came and went. Emma left for college in Sacramento, though she still called almost every evening. The workshop remained busy. Duke remained old. Life moved forward, but not in the numb way it once had. One rainy evening, Ryan found himself standing in the kitchen staring at an old photograph. Sarah smiled back from the frame. She had been 33 when the picture was taken, tall and graceful, with dark chestnut hair that curled naturally at the ends. Sarah possessed the rare ability to make people feel understood within minutes of meeting them. She never entered a room quietly. Not because she demanded attention, but because warmth followed her everywhere. Ryan remembered something she once told him. People aren't promises. They're opportunities. The memory appeared unexpectedly and refused to leave. For years, Ryan had tried to protect himself from loss. Now he finally understood something. Protection had become another word for isolation. Across the country, Charlotte Bennett sat in another board meeting. But something had changed. Not around her, inside her. The endless presentations no longer impressed her. The numbers no longer excited her. The competition no longer motivated her. Not because she had stopped caring, because she had finally realized success could not answer every question. The board's demands still stood. New York full-time, no exceptions. No more disappearing to Napa, no more divided priorities. Charlotte listened, then asked a question. What happens if I say no? Silence followed. Several executives exchanged glances. David Mercer sat near the end of the table, watching. The chairman folded his hands. Then we'll need to discuss succession planning. There it was, the threat. Professional, polite, predictable. A year earlier, it would have terrified her, Now it simply felt sad. After the meeting, David caught up with her in the hallway. "You surprised them." Charlotte smiled faintly. "I'm getting good at that." David studied her. The older man had spent decades navigating boardrooms. He understood ambition better than most people understood themselves. Yet today he seemed almost amused. "You're not going to quit." Charlotte shook her head. "No." "Good." That answer surprised her. David noticed. "You thought I'd tell you to choose love over work?" Charlotte laughed softly. "A little." "That's because movies have damaged everyone's expectations." For the first time in months, Charlotte genuinely laughed. David continued. "Real adults don't abandon entire lives because they fall in love." The words sounded simple, but they struck something important. "Then what do they do?" Charlotte asked. David shrugged. "They figure it out." 3 weeks later, Charlotte returned to Napa Valley. Not permanently, not dramatically. No grand announcement, no resignation letter, no life-changing speech. She simply rented the same house again, for 2 weeks every month. The board hated it. The shareholders survived. Life continued. Ryan learned she was back from Emma. She rented the vineyard house again. Ryan looked up from a workbench. Emma grinned through a video call. "You gonna just sit there?" Ryan sighed. "You're impossible." "I get that from Mom." Neither of them argued. The next morning, Ryan drove past the vineyard road. The house stood exactly where it always had. So did Charlotte. She sat on the porch drinking coffee. For a moment, neither moved. Then she saw him. The same chestnut hair, the same thoughtful eyes, the same woman. Except now she looked less guarded, as if months of difficult decisions had finally exhausted her defenses. Ryan parked, walked across the driveway. Charlotte stood. Neither smiled immediately. Neither knew how. Finally, she spoke. "Hi." "Hi." The simplicity felt almost ridiculous. Months of silence, reduced to one word. Charlotte looked down briefly, then back at him. "I owe you an apology." Ryan nodded. "So do I." That surprised her. "For what?" "For pretending I was angry about your job." Charlotte waited. Ryan continued. "I was angry because I cared." The truth sounded embarrassingly simple, but also correct. Charlotte's eyes softened. "I should have trusted you." "Yeah." "I didn't know how." Ryan believed her. That was the difference. Months ago, he would have demanded explanations. Now, he simply listened. Over the following weeks, they talked. Not once, not twice. Dozens of times. Long conversations. Uncomfortable conversations. Necessary conversations. About money. About distance. About expectations. About fear. About Sarah. About the company. About everything neither had been brave enough to say before. No dramatic declarations followed. No miraculous solutions appeared. Just honesty. The slow kind. The difficult kind. The kind that actually lasts. Spring arrived, then summer. A full year passed. Charlotte remained CEO. The company continued growing. Ryan remained in Napa. The workshop expanded gradually through new contracts and growing demand. Emma flourished at college. Duke grew older but stubbornly refused to act his age. Life became something neither Ryan nor Charlotte tried to control anymore. One August morning sunlight streamed through the workshop windows. Ryan stood shaping a walnut tabletop while music played softly from an old radio. The bell above the door rang. He looked up. Charlotte entered carrying 2 coffees. A red summer dress moved gently with the morning breeze. For a second, Ryan was struck by how ordinary the moment felt. A year ago, he would have thought that disappointing. Now it felt perfect. Charlotte placed 1 coffee beside him. "Morning." "Morning." She leaned against the workbench, comfortable, certain, present, no longer running. Neither of them were. Outside, Duke lifted his head from his favorite patch of sunlight. Inside, sawdust drifted through the air. The workshop smelled of cedar and coffee. An ordinary morning. Charlotte took a sip from her cup, then looked at him. "You busy tonight?" Ryan smiled. The answer came easily. "Yeah." Charlotte raised an eyebrow. His smile widened. "Busy having dinner with you." For a second, she laughed. A real laugh, unforced, warm, the kind Ryan hadn't heard often enough. Then she shook her head. "You know what I meant." "I know." He set down the sanding block, met her eyes, and answered, "Yes." For the first time in years, neither of them were trying to escape anything, and that was more than enough. Sometimes God's miracles don't arrive as sudden answers. Sometimes they come disguised as ordinary people, unexpected meetings, and second chances we never saw coming. Ryan and Charlotte didn't save each other. They simply helped each other find the courage to live again. If this story touched your heart, please share where you're watching from and leave a comment below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more inspiring stories. May God bless you, protect your family, bring peace to your heart, and guide your steps wherever life takes you. Thank you for watching.